Ord for the penthouse in Milan. Guarantor Adeline Vance. Status active. I hovered my mouse over the button that said, Revoke signature. I sat there for 2 hours. I watched the clock tick, 10:50, 11:15, 12:30. I imagined them at the country club, the sunlight hitting the perfectly manicured lawn, Olivia in her new designer dress, funded by the wardrobe allowance line item on my spreadsheet. My mother holding court, smiling that tight, perfect smile, telling everyone how proud she was. At 12:45, my alarm went off. The sound was sharp in the quiet apartment. It was time. I didn't hesitate. My hand didn't shake. I clicked cancel reservation on the airline site. A little spinning wheel, and then booking canceled. Refund processed to original payment method. I switched tabs. I clicked revoke. A warning box popped up. Revoking guarantor status will immediately void the lease agreement. Are you sure? I clicked yes. Lease voided. Tenant notification sent. I sat back in my chair. The room was silent. But on the other side of town, invisible signals were racing through the air, carrying a digital eviction notice straight to my sister's pocket. It was done. The question wasn't whether I had done the right thing. The question was, why had I ever thought I could buy my way into a family that didn't want me? To understand why I was sitting in my apartment alone on a Saturday nuking my sister's future from orbit, you have to understand the receipt. And I don't just mean the emotional toll. I mean the actual literal receipt. I pulled up the summary tab on my spreadsheet. The total was staring back at me in bold black numbers, $18,400. Let's break that down. $6,200 for the flight. One-way first class. Not because Olivia asked for it, but because my mother insisted. She needs to arrive fresh, Adeline, she'd said. She's starting a master's program. She can't show up looking like she slept in a pretzel. I had nodded. I had agreed. Because I wanted to be the good sister. $8,000 for the penthouse deposit. Milan is expensive. And landlords there don't care about your potential or your vibes. They care about credit scores and bank statements. Olivia had neither. She had a maxed out credit card and a history of forgetting to pay her phone bill. So I stepped in, I signed, I put down the cash. It's just a formality, I told myself. She'll pay me back when she gets settled. $4,200 for the designer wardrobe fund. This one still made my stomach turn. Olivia had convinced everyone that to be taken seriously in Milanese fashion circles, she couldn't show up in fast fashion. She needed investment pieces. My father had shrugged and said, "She has a point." My mother had looked at me with those expectant eyes, the ones that said, "You have a good job, don't you want your sister to succeed?" So I paid. I paid for the boots, I paid for the coat, I paid for the bag that cost more than my first car. I was the provider. I was the fixer. I was the one they called when the printer was jammed, when the taxes were due, when the car made a funny noise. I was useful. And in my head, useful was a stepping stone to being loved. I thought about the sunk cost fallacy. In economics, it's the idea that you keep pouring money into a failing project because you've already spent so much on it. You think, I can't quit now, I've invested too much. You throw good money after bad, hoping that eventually the project will turn around and pay you back. That was my relationship with my family. I had treated their love like a bad investment. I kept thinking, if I just pay this one last bill, if I just solve this one last crisis, then they'll see me. Then I'll be cohesive. Then I'll be blood. But love isn't a vending machine. You don't put in coins until a relationship falls out. I had been pouring resources into a black hole, terrified that if I stopped, I'd have to admit that the last 20 years of effort had been for nothing, that the account was empty, that it had always been empty. I wasn't generous. I was traumatized. I was a little girl in a woman's body handing over my lunch money to the bullies, hoping they'd let me sit at their table. But today the lunch money was gone, and so was the table. I looked at the time. 12:50. The notifications would be hitting Olivia's phone right about now. The vibration in her clutch, the screen lighting up. I closed the spreadsheet. I didn't need to look at the numbers anymore. I knew them by heart. While I sat in the silence of my apartment across town, the champagne was already flowing. I didn't need to be there to know exactly what the scene looked like. I learned the details later, pieced together from social media posts and the receipts of the day, but honestly, I could have scripted it myself. The Bon Voyage brunch was being held at the Sterling Oaks Country Club. It was the kind of place that smelled like old money and fresh lilies. I knew this because I had paid the deposit. I had selected the Tuscan Sun floral package because Olivia said it matched her Milan aesthetic. At that very moment, my mother Angela was undoubtedly holding court in the center of the patio. She would be wearing the cream linen suit I'd helped her pick out online 3 weeks ago. She'd have a glass of Prosecco in one hand, gesturing expansively to the guests, a curated mix of family friends, Olivia's fashion, school peers, and anyone else Angela wanted to impress. She was bragging. That was her currency. She was telling them about the sacrifices the family had made to get Olivia this opportunity. She was spinning a narrative where she and my father were the benevolent patrons of the arts, sending their brilliant daughter off to conquer Europe. "We just want her to fly," she'd be saying, dabbing a dry eye. We pulled out all the stops. Nothing is too good for our Olivia. She wouldn't mention my name. If someone asked, "Where's Adeline?" she'd have a practiced, breezy answer ready. "Oh, you know Adeline. She's so busy with work. She sends her love, of course, but she just couldn't get away." It was a lie so smooth it didn't even register as a sin to her anymore. It was just PR. Crisis management for a crisis they had created. And Olivia. She would be posing near the floral archway. She'd be wearing the silk wrap dress that cost $600, item line 42 on my spreadsheet. She'd be laughing, tilting her head just right for the photographer soaking in the adoration. She wasn't thinking about the sister who had spent 3 nights researching visa requirements for her. She wasn't thinking about the deposit. She was thinking about her cohesive photos. They weren't mourning my absence. They weren't feeling a pang of guilt that the person who funded the party wasn't allowed to eat the cake. They were relieved. Without me there, the image was perfect. No awkward adoptee to explain. No one to remind them that their lifestyle was subsidized. Just the beautiful biological trio glowing in the success they hadn't earned. It was the villain's escalation in its purest form erasure. They hadn't just uninvited me. They had erased me from the narrative I had written for them. I checked the clock. 12:49. I imagined the waiter topping off my mother's glass. I imagined Olivia checking her phone, not to see if I'd texted, but to check her engagement on Instagram. They were celebrating their victory. They thought they had won the ultimate prize, my resources, without my presence. They thought they had successfully extracted the gold and discarded the mine. But they had forgotten one thing. The mine still held the deed. My phone buzzed again. It was 12:50. 5 minutes after I had hit execute. 5 minutes after the digital eviction notice had been sent, hurtling toward my sister's pocket. I looked at the screen expecting a confirmation email from the airline or a furious text from Olivia asking why her app was glitching. I expected the fallout to be loud. I expected screaming. But it wasn't Olivia. It was Thomas, my father. Dad. The name appeared on the screen, foreign and heavy. My father was the sleeping giant. For 20 years, he had been a piece of furniture in his own home. He watched my mother's cruelty and Olivia's entitlement with a vague, detached sadness, but he never intervened. He was the passive enabler. The one who would hug me in the hallway when Mom wasn't looking and whisper, "She doesn't mean it," before retreating back to his newspaper. He was the Switzerland of our family, war neutral, but only because he refused to see the bodies. I stared at the notification. It wasn't a text. It was an audio file. No caption. Just a 3-minute voice note. My stomach tightened. Was this a plea? Was he going to beg me to come to the brunch? Was he going to tell me to stop being dramatic and send more money? I pressed play. The sound was tinny at first, the background noise of clinking silverware and low chatter. He must have recorded it at the table phone face down on the linen tablecloth. The audio quality was rough, but the voices were unmistakable. Then my mother's voice cut through the static sharp and clear. "Honestly, Tom, stop looking so sour. It's better this way. Thank God Adeline isn't here to ruin the aesthetic. You know how she gets. She hovers." I heard the sound of liquid being poured. Probably champagne. Probably the vintage I had paid for. "She's useful," my mother continued, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper she used when she was being particularly venomous. "She's useful, but she's so heavy. She always looks at us like we owe her something. It's exhausting." I stopped breathing. Heavy. My love, my effort, my desperate attempts to please them. It wasn't just unappreciated. It was a burden to them. My devotion was a weight they resented carrying, even while they spent the gold I mined from it. Then Olivia's voice. Bright, airy, and laughing. "Don't worry about it, Mom. She'll get over it. She always does. We just have to send her a nice postcard from Milan." "I hope she doesn't cut off the funds," my father's voice mumbled. It sounded distant, like he was testing the waters. Olivia laughed again. A cruel, dismissive sound. "She won't. She's obsessed with us. She's just the wallet, Mom. You don't invite the wallet to the party, you just make sure it's full. The recording ended. The silence in my apartment was deafening. She's just the wallet. I played it again. I had to be sure. I had to be absolutely certain that I wasn't hallucinating the cruelty. I listened to my mother call me heavy. I listened to my sister, the girl I had carried on my back for years, reduce my entire existence to a leather accessory she kept in her purse. I didn't feel sad anymore. The sadness evaporated, burned away by a white-hot flash of clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a communication style difference. This was exploitation, pure and simple. I looked at the phone. A new text bubble appeared from my father. Just 5 words. Do what you have to do. I stared at the message. The sleeping giant had woken up. He had sat there listening to them, dissect me, listening to them, laugh about using me, and something in him had finally snapped. This was the enabler's awakening. It is a rare and violent phenomenon in toxic family systems. The quiet parent, the one who keeps the peace at all costs, finally reaches a threshold where the cost of peace becomes too high. For years, Thomas had been the covert observer, the one who sees everything but says nothing, convincing himself that his silence is neutrality. But silence isn't neutrality, it's complicity. Today he had looked at his wife and his golden child, and for the first time he hadn't seen his family. He had seen monsters. He realized that by staying silent, he wasn't protecting the peace. He was handing them the ammunition. He knew what I was capable of. He knew I handled the logistics. And he was giving me the codes to the nuclear football. He wasn't just warning me, he was defecting. I picked up my phone and typed 2 words back. It's done. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere in the distance, a server was walking toward their table with a bottle of champagne. Somewhere in the cloud, a cancellation command was bouncing off a satellite racing toward Olivia's phone. The wallet wasn't just closed, it was incinerated. It started at 1:15. I was still standing by the window when my phone lit up again. This time it wasn't a text from my dad. It was a notification that my airline app had successfully processed a refund. A moment later, an automated email from the Milan Property Group confirmed that the lease was void. Across town at the Sterling Oaks Country Club, the digital bombs were making landfall. I didn't need a live feed to know what was happening. I knew Olivia's settings. She had push notifications on for everything. I imagined the phone buzzing in her clutch, just as the waiter finished pouring the toast. She would glance down, expecting a congratulations text or a new follower. Instead, she would see the red alert from Delta trip canceled. Then the email from the realtor guarantor withdrawn. The first call came at 1:17. It was Olivia. I let it ring. Then my mother. I let it ring. Then Olivia again. Then a barrage of texts that ranged from, "Is this a joke?" to, "Pick up the phone." I put the phone on Do Not Disturb. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. I sat on my sofa and waited. I knew they wouldn't just call. They were the kind of people who believed presence was power. They would come here. They would try to force me to fix the glitch. It took them exactly 45 minutes to leave the party, get in the car, and speed across the city. At 2 o'clock, the pounding started. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a frantic, entitlement-fueled assault on my front door. I could hear my mother's voice shrill and muffled through the wood. "Adeline, open this door. I know you're in there." I took a sip of tea. I set the mug down on a coaster. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked calm. I looked like someone who hadn't spent the morning crying but planning. I walked to the door and unlocked it. I pulled it open. They were a sight. My mother was still in her cream linen suit, but her face was blotchy and red. Olivia was behind her mascara running down her cheeks, looking like a pageant queen who'd just been told the crown was plastic. "What did you do?" Angela screamed the moment she saw me. She pushed past me into the foyer, bringing the smell of expensive perfume and panic with her. "What did you do, Adeline?" "The airline said the ticket was canceled by the purchaser. The landlord says the lease is void." Olivia was shaking. "Fix it," she sobbed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Put the card back on file right now." The landlord said, "If we don't secure it by close of business, the unit goes to the next person on the list. You have to call them." Now, they weren't asking. They weren't apologizing for excluding me. They were demanding. They were treating this like a service outage, and I was the IT department they needed to scream at until the internet came back on. "You ruined everything," my mother shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? We had to leave our own party. You are going to fix this, Adeline. You are going to call them, apologize for the mistake, and pay whatever fee they want." I stood there leaning against the doorframe. I didn't yell back. I didn't try to explain my hurt. I just reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "I'm not fixing anything," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through their hysteria like a blade. "What?" Olivia gasped. "You can't do this. You promised." "I promised to help family," I said, "but I was informed today that I'm not family." "Oh, stop being so dramatic," Angela snapped, waving her hand dismissively. "Because of the photos, are you seriously doing this? Because of a photo?" I didn't answer. I just unlocked my screen. I pulled up the audio file Thomas had sent me. I turned the volume all the way up. "Listen," I said. I pressed play. The tiny speaker filled the hallway with the sounds of the country club, the clinking silverware, the background chatter, and then my mother's voice crystal clear and cruel. "She's useful, but she's so heavy. She always looks at us like we owe her something. It's exhausting." Angela froze. Her face went from red to a ghostly white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then Olivia's voice chirped from the phone. "She won't. She's obsessed with us. She's just the wallet, Mom. You don't invite the wallet to the party. You just make sure it's full." The recording ended. The silence in the hallway was absolute. It was heavier than anything I had ever felt. Olivia looked at me, her eyes wide with horror, not because she was sorry, but because she had been caught. The mask had slipped, and she knew she couldn't put it back on. My mother looked like she had been slapped. She looked at the phone, then at me, searching for an excuse, a spin, a way to gaslight her way out of her own recorded voice. "Adeline," she started, her voice trembling. We were just venting. You know, we didn't mean—" "I know exactly what you meant," I interrupted. "You meant that I am a resource, not a person. You meant that my money is welcome, but I am not." I looked at Olivia. She was still crying, but the entitlement was draining out of her, replaced by the terrifying realization that her safety net had just set itself on fire. "The wallet is closed," I said, permanently. "But I can't go without you," Olivia whispered. "I can't afford it." "I know," I said. "Figure it out." I stepped back. I took the door handle. "Adeline, please," my mother begged, stepping forward, reaching for me. "We can talk about this. Don't do this to your sister." "You did this," I said. "I just signed the receipt." I slammed the door. I threw the deadbolt. I stood there for a second, listening. I heard my mother sobbing on the other side. I heard Olivia screaming at her. I walked back to the living room. My tea was still warm. The fallout wasn't loud. It was a slow, crumbling slide into reality. Olivia didn't go to Milan. The landlord, spooked by the sudden revocation of the guarantor, refused to reinstate the lease, even when my mother offered to put it on her maxed-out credit card. The unit went to the next person on the wait list, a nice architecture student from Berlin, I heard later. The first-class seat I had released was snatched up by an algorithm within minutes. By the time Olivia stopped screaming on my front porch, her dream was already being parted out to strangers. The social embarrassment was absolute. The Bon Voyage brunch became the staycation brunch, people whispered. The narrative shifted. My mother tried to spin it, of course. She told people there were visa complications or scheduling conflicts, but Charleston is a small town. The voice note circulated. People knew. They knew that the golden child had been grounded because the pilot finally walked off the job. Thomas, my dad, didn't just send a text and disappear back into the furniture. 2 days later, he showed up at my office with a box of donuts and a folder of paperwork. He had moved into the guest room. He was separating his finances from Angela. He looked tired, but he also looked awake for the first time in 20 years. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just asked if I wanted to grab lunch. We went to a taco truck. We sat on a park bench. We didn't talk about Milan. We talked about my job. He asked me how my code worked. It was the first conversation we'd ever had where I wasn't being asked to fix something. But the real resolution didn't happen in a lawyer's office or a country club. It happened on my balcony 3 weeks later. I was sitting there with a glass of wine watching the sun dip below the skyline. It was quiet. For the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like exclusion. It felt like peace. I closed my eyes and pictured a book, a heavy leather-bound ledger I had been carrying around in my head since I was 4 years old. For decades, I had been the diligent accountant of my own abuse. I tracked every entry. Debit 1, perfect grade report. Credit, maybe they'll love me. Debit, fixing mom's printer. Credit, maybe I belong. Debit, $18,000 for Milan. Credit, surely this is enough. I had spent my life waiting for the accounts to balance. I thought if I just poured enough into the debit column, eventually the universe or my mother would have to make a deposit in the credit column. I thought love was a transaction, and I was just waiting for my return on investment. But sitting there in the cool evening air, I realized the truth. The ledger was a lie. There was no bank. There was no vault where my kindness was being stored up for a rainy day. They weren't saving my love. They were consuming it. They were burning it for warmth and laughing at the smoke. I took a sip of wine. In my mind, I picked up a red stamp. I looked at the pages and pages of unrequited effort. The years of showing up, the money, the time, the tears. I didn't try to collect. I didn't try to send an invoice. I just stamped it bad debt. I wrote it all off. Every cent. Every second. I accepted that the return was zero, and then I mentally tossed the book over the railing and watched it fall into the city below. The relief was physical. It started in my chest and washed down to my fingertips. I wasn't losing a family. I was liquidating a failing asset. I was freeing up my resources, my heart, my money, my time, for people who wouldn't require a down payment to care about me. I wasn't lonely. I was solvent. I looked at my phone. No new texts, no demands, just a clear screen and a full battery. I took another sip of wine. It tasted like freedom. If you've ever felt like you were paying a tax just to exist in your own family, share this story. You are not an ATM and you are not an option. See you in the next one.